You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here, as always, with my very good friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Yeah. You know, you are going to be, what are you going to be this year?
73.
73.
Yeah.
And
as if I live that long.
You keep talking about, oh, I'm going to retire this year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, didn't you retire 10 years ago? Didn't you retire 10 years before that? You've gone through an evolution of retiring.
I'm tired of retiring.
Yeah. You're going to have to take a vacation from retiring.
Okay.
So, but not to be, I mean, I don't mean to be discounting, right, any of this, but so you did a thing where you stop seeing clients as your primary source of income. And then you did a lot of other things, and you've slowly kind of stopped doing some of those other things, and now you're going to get to a point where you're going to be retired, where you're just going to be a guy who hangs out with his wife.
I'll be one of those old men that sits on his front porch and watches the world go by.
Exactly.
And makes caustic comments about everybody that they see go down the street.
I don't know if you're going to do that, but
I will. I'm sure I will.
Well, that's good, because then whenever I drive
when I'm
through
sitting next to my wife, who will slap me and say, "Stop that! Don't talk like that."
Webster, then I'll actually, because I drive by your house all the time when I'm driving through Webster, and I wave. And we were going to, and this is not good radio because people won't know this, but we were going to Sushi Station, which is in Webster, a couple of weeks ago. And
you didn't stop and say, "Hey, you want to go get some?"
No, we don't, because I always feel like I'd be imposing if I just stopped.
Well, that's right, because my wife and I have a real life while you don't.
That's how I feel. So we drove by your house, and everything was open, and we could see through it. And there was
I running around naked, or was anybody?
I don't know.
Okay.
I wasn't looking that closely because...
Well, I wouldn't if I were.
Because I was driving.
Yeah.
But my wife said, "Oh, there's Phyllis."
Yeah.
So apparently...
Well, Phyllis at least was home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So I drive by your house and I wave, but now if you're sitting out on the front porch and being crotchety, then when I drive by your house and wave, you'll be able to wave back. But you won't, because you'll be crotchety.
I'll give you one finger wave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you, though, feel like that retirement has been a positive and beneficial experience for you.
Yes. And I'm hoping even more so as time goes by.
Yeah. And I
recommend it to all my friends. Hurry up.
I know.
Yeah.
As a person who is trained in the delivery of psychotherapy, what would you say is the most positive thing that you've gotten out of being retired?
I would say the awareness that life is rich and full if you're retired, in the same way it is if you're working. I mean, life goes on. People ask all the time, "What do you do when you're retired?" We're busier than we've ever been.
Which is absolutely true. I know for a fact.
Yeah, and I think those are good things. The bigger differential would be I seem to be doing things that I want to do when I want to do them, instead of things that I have to do or should do by somebody else's definition. I'm not on the clock anymore.
Yeah.
So nobody commands my time. I may volunteer it somewhere. I may donate it somewhere. I may do it for money somewhere, but I do it under my own parameters.
So would you be open to an observation?
Yeah.
The thing that I have observed as you have gone through this process is
these layers of disengagement.
Is that, well, except that that's always the fear, is that somebody will disengage.
Yeah.
And they'll become more insulated. And you haven't. You've become more, if anything, more connected, and that the level of personal introspection that you've engaged in, since you've been retired.
Well, I never had time for it before.
I guess that's, if that's the case, then, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm grateful. Thank you.
And that kind of then segues into what we wanted to talk about today, and that is that as trained psychotherapists, one of the things that both of us have been concerned about, especially during the pandemic, has been what is happening to people's relationships. Because we hear in the media, we hear reports of, we've been sequestered at home with our kids and with
child
our
abuse,
loved ones.
spousal abuse, fighting, drinking.
Well, we've heard, that it's been the best thing, and we're but we know that the number of incidents of child abuse has gone up.
Well,
we might not see it reflected because not as many people are working and going out and following up, or those things aren't getting reported. But we know statistically that it's had to
getting reported. Although they're getting reported some, because you get information about police calls and domestic dispute arrests and those kind of things. But I was thinking about my wife used to be an elementary teacher, and she's a mandated reporter in the state of Missouri. So if you suspect child abuse, or if you know child abuse exists, you have to make a report to the state, and then they check it out. And she used to get so frustrated because the families that abuse their children know all the rules, and they teach their children all the rules. So the kids know what you can ask and what they can say, and they're taught what to say to avoid getting such a report.
So I would say groomed.
Yeah, they're groomed. So when suspicions would arise because of patterns of behavior or what have you, and the system would begin to say, well, wait a minute, Mrs. Jones, can we have a conversation with you? Then suddenly those children were homeschooled.
Right.
Because in Missouri, parents have the right to pull the kids out of public schools and say, I'm going to teach them everything they need to know at home. Mm-hmm. And in reality, because I served for the state of Missouri on the Child Abuse and Neglect Review Board for cases where people were accused of abusing their children. And I can tell you from my experience in the classroom, and my experience as a clinician, and my experience on the Child Abuse and Neglect Review Board, there are families that are incredibly cognizant, knowledgeable about the fact that they are abusing their children and exactly how to work the system to avoid the consequences of that.
Right.
I'm not sure anymore because I'm old. I lost the thread of this conversation. I don't know how we got into it.
Yeah.
But
that we're
we were talking about the pandemic and people staying at home and more children being abused, and we're not hearing about it. Well, you may not hear about it because a lot of them are incredibly skilled at hiding it.
Mm-hmm. I read an article yesterday about a 2-star general that had sexually abused. Did you read that?
Yeah.
Systematically sexually abused his daughter for years, and that I don't know that the military actively covered it up, but they certainly didn't try and uncover it. And his wife is, not only has she remained married to him, but even now that the allegations have broken and he's actually admitted to just one count because that's all that he could be charged with within the statute of limitations, she continues to remain committed to him.
But you know that happens. I mean, we've worked with families that were children say the priest has abused me, and the family would break up because the family couldn't face that reality. Their commitment to the church was so intense that they said the child had to be lying.
Right.
And so they favored and protected the status quo of the church and the priest at the cost to the child.
Right. Now, we're talking about all of the negative stuff that can happen. What we want to try and focus on is people are staying at home.
The other thing to say, because you brought up the example of the general, child abuse happens in all income levels, in all societal levels, in all places. There is child abuse among the poorest and among the wealthiest. So this general would be an example of the highest status level offender, but they do happen everywhere. So it's not just some weird occasional random thing out there.
Right. Well, and the priest scandal was an example of it happening at the highest levels, the highest levels of respect and trust.
Right.
I mean, he's a priest. He couldn't possibly abuse anybody. They used that as their defense for really millennia, because it's been going on throughout history.
Right.
And
not just among Catholics. When we talk about priests,
priests,
people hear the word priest, they think Catholic.
Yeah.
But other religious groups and organizations also struggle with the same problem. People who are drawn to the ministry because it gives authority and power, many of those people have negative attributes that have to be watched.
And we should say that in a former life, you and I worked in a group practice that here in St. Louis, Missouri, was a part of vetting and creating the response to the priest scandal, and that for years we worked to go out into the community and present information about child sexual abuse to religious organizations and other groups as well.
Yeah.
And so we have some history in that, and that's why we know that it goes on. We know the depth of it, we know the etiology of it, but we also know that it happens in all religious organizations, in all socioeconomic classes, in every faction that you can think of society. This happens, and that it mostly happens within familial systems. So the probability of being abused by a stranger is incredibly small.
Yeah.
That it's the overwhelming majority is in these insulated family systems where you can have, I'd use the word grooming, and we know that that is a psychological term that children are educated to be good victims.
Yes.
And that they are educated at a time when they are very impressionable and don't have the ability to question, am I being victimized?
Right.
And that by the time they get to a place where they do recognize
they're trained not to reality test. This didn't happen to you. You
Right.
didn't see this. This didn't happen. If you tell people that it happened, then nobody will believe you, and I'll come back and kill your dog. Or your mother, or your sister, or
Well, you'll get in trouble because you were a complicit, willing participant.
Right.
That's what they are trained to believe, and so by the time they do get to a point where they can question it, so this general's daughter, she didn't talk about it until she was in college,
Right.
and when they do get to a point where they question it, they themselves question the veracity of their memories.
Well, and the perpetrators know the statute of limitations.
Yeah.
So they keep the messaging going for long enough to make themselves safe.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about the most negative aspects of what's going on because people are quarantined at home. But what we really wanted to talk about was how you can use
Have
this.
a nice, loving relationship at home.
Exactly, because people are at home and they're under a lot of stress, and so that's going to exacerbate what we're talking about with the sexual abuse or child abuse in general, and what we're talking about with the substance abuse. All of those things are going to be exacerbated as a result of the quarantine at home. And we're going to have to deal with the aftermath of that once the quarantine ends.
Right.
But what we want to try and focus on for the remainder of our time is, this also plays out in our relationships. Now, for me, I've had a little bit different experience during the pandemic because I've said, I've continued to go to my office. Even when I was seeing all virtual clients, I went to my office because I wanted to maintain, even if I was the only
That
person in the
structure.
building,
Yeah.
I wanted to maintain, that structure and not deviate from my schedule. And my wife has a job where she had continued to work. And so we've continued that even though the quarantine's been going on. But most people, their experience is one person is at home or both people are at home, and they've had to live together under the regime of what it means to be quarantined. And while people say, oh, that's been a good experience, what we know statistically is that for a lot of people, it's been hard.
Yeah.
And what can people do to, if they are finding, because now we're looking at the pandemic not only is it not going to get less, it's getting worse, and it might be worse until there's a vaccine. And so what can we offer to people to try and mitigate the stress that people are feeling as a result of the quarantine?
Well, we can thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
We can give them our thoughts and prayers.
Sure. That'll make everything better. But psychologically, the what I am the most aware of and have been harping on, and this is we're talking about is how do you make your relationship better just when there's stress, period.
Yeah.
The most stress that or we know now that there's a tremendous amount of stress as a result of the quarantine. But the one thing that I have been most aware of is the lack in, or the detriment in, human connectedness. And that's why I hate the term social distancing. And I've said forever, we need to talk about physical distancing, maintaining social connections.
Right.
Because that is so important. I had a client yesterday who was talking to me about, he had met this girl online, and he was afraid to tell his parents because he was afraid that his parents would be upset about that, but he really likes this girl. And I said, dude, in this modern reality, everybody's meeting online.
Yeah.
You can't. That's not even not a thing. That's like normal. So if your parents are going to be distressed about that, certainly I will be an advocate for you. But I don't even think that they will be, because that's all people are doing. I mean, people are meeting online, they're dating online, and they're finding ways of maintaining social connection. You can find ways of maintaining social connection even during the quarantine.
And you should.
And you should. And so we're really, really encouraging people to find opportunities to be able to maintain social connection. Now, what I don't want people doing is, I don't want people doing we live in St. Louis, so there's a popular tourist place around St. Louis called the Ozarks, and there was a famous photo over the Memorial Day holiday where a bunch of people were, not socially distanced, not wearing masks, who were having a party in the Lake of the Ozarks, and then we saw a spike in the number of COVID-19 infections afterwards. And so a lot of people were saying, oh, see, this was because of the party that was down at Lake of the Ozarks. Now, you have since gotten information from sources close to the governor that says that that's not true. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but that's exactly not the thing that I want people to do. I want people to be on Miami Beach without a mask and with 1,000 of your closest friends being in close proximity.
Go to Walmart and wear a mask.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's my own bias about masks. So when you talk about people that are trapped at home, quarantined with the same people day after day after day, and maybe they're trying to work from home, or maybe they can't work from home, but they can't go to work, and they're worried about money. They're worried about paying the rent. They're worried about buying groceries. They're worried about dealing with the children. A single parent with 2 little kids running around the house screaming and yelling, needing attention. I mean, it gets really intense. It gets really stressful. So you said, what can we offer them? I think we offer them, in some measure, what we always offer them, which is a conversation about the importance of communication. The better your communication skills, the better your attending, the better your reflective listening skills are, the better your relationships will be. Because when I can listen accurately to you, I can identify what you've said, both verbally and non-verbally. And so we teach them formulas about when I feel, because, for how to identify what I think you are feeling and communicating to me, and then ask for validation. Am I understanding what you need me to hear?
Right.
And if you teach people those skills and they're able to implement them at home, then their relationships at home are less chaotic. and less vulnerable to explosion or implosion.
Right.
Because I'm able to come in and say, and we did a podcast recently on social cue awareness. If I'm sitting in the room in the dark staring at the wall and my wife comes in and says, hey, what's going on? Ideally, I'm able to say, I'm lost. I'm scared. I'm hurt. I'm mad. I'm sad. I saw this thing on TV and it upset me, and I'm just sitting here mulling it over. And then she can sit down and say, well, let's talk about that.
Right.
What about that upset you? How can I be helpful? Would you like me to fix you a piece of pie? You know, what will make it better for you? Because I've heard that you are in distress. Instead of saying, oh, blow that off. That's nothing. Get up. You know, we need to cut the grass.
And I think that's such an incredible point. Now, so first off, let me just say that's
Jump
exactly
right in
why
wherever you want to.
That's exactly why people should listen to all of our shows, because they're all interconnected. I say that in jest, but it's also true.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, because what I'm afraid of is that people, especially during the quarantine, instead of remaining more connected, not just to people outside the home, but even to people inside the home, that what the tendency is that the longer the quarantine goes on, the more that people are doing separate things.
Right.
Like, we're all in the house together, but we're all in separate
different
rooms,
rooms,
looking
all
at different
using-
screens. Yeah.
Well, we did a podcast months and months ago about sex, and the fact that there's a lot of data out there right now that says people are mainly having sex by masturbating, sometimes laying next to their partner, looking at separate video things on their iPads or their cell phones.
Right.
You know, they're not connecting with each other, even for sex. It's a disturbing trend.
It is a disturbing trend. And so then I hear what you're saying. You know, you can look at your partner and say, okay, I can sense distress, and I want to think about ways that I could try and help alleviate that in you. But how do people maintain the desire? Because it's one thing to be able to look at your partner and look and see the distress. It's another thing to maintain the desire.
I don't give a damn anyway. If you go in there and suck your toe. That's a great question. And I would say I've learned through the last number of years that part of that is the physiology. And you have the right hormone balances. But a lot of it is the level of affection and connection. And again, you come back to the question of communication. It's got to be reciprocal. I have to see you so that you feel seen and safe and desired. And you have to see me so that I feel the same thing. We have to see our children the same way. If that's not happening, then there's a huge, huge time bomb ticking in the household.
Right. And I think that for me, trying to facilitate that desire is really about what you're saying with communication, is that I'm encouraging people to go into the physical space of the other people in your home and say, I realize maybe I haven't been 100% present, and I want you to know I'm making a commitment to become more present. I want you to recognize that. If you see me not being present, I want you to call me out on it, and I want you to make a commitment to me the same way.
Yeah, you can say those words. Where's the action?
Well,
are you going to be responsive?
Yeah.
If you call my name, I will come. If you call my name and I don't come, then I was lying.
Right. But it also could be that I'm just struggling, and so
it could be.
Call my name. If I don't come, then
come
hey,
find out why not.
We agreed that we were going to do this, and then if what you get is not a response that you want, then it's important to process that. So why have you not been able to follow through with that? Are you struggling in a way that I need to be more concerned about? Because that could be a thing. Yeah,
and one question that comes to mind is it me? Are you upset with me? Do we have a problem?
But
or is it something else?
What I would tell people is that for right now, don't assume it's you.
People are always going to assume it's you, Michael.
I know.
So you have to help them learn how to talk through that. And one way is to ask the question, you upset with me? Have I done something?
Yeah.
Are you withdrawing from me because I've not anticipated your need or satisfied it in some way?
What I would say is, if you feel like it's you, then call me so that I can tell you it's not you. Don't assume that it's you, right? Assume that there's something going on with them that is causing them to be blocked.
Oh,
and
would that they could.
Yeah.
That's not how people work.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah. But if we can reduce, we had talked about when we were talking about psychedelics,
give them the tools,
and we were talking about, that we're also
so they just all take LSD.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I know that we are all focused on our own internal processes in a way that is difficult for us to let go of. But it is also true that the entire universe doesn't revolve around us as individuals.
It is?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my.
Yeah. No, but I understand that's a hard thing for people to be able to hear and to be able to remain committed to accepting.
But there are many ways for that to happen. My wife will say to me, "What would you like to do today?"
Yeah.
And I look at her like she's speaking Russian.
Sure.
What am I going to do today? What I do every day.
Right.
I don't know. What do you want to do today? Well, I would like to do whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah.
Well, that's not helpful.
No.
We get caught in that loop, you know. Where do you want to go to dinner?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Well, you pick a place. Well, okay, I'll pick this place. No, I don't want Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
People get caught in that stuff all the time, and that's not what we're talking about when we talk about communicating better and making contact better.
Right.
So I think it's better to say...
Transferring responsibility is not necessarily good communication.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand that people would feel like it was.
Well,
but
because that way it puts
what
the
I'm afraid
responsibility
of,
on you, not on me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if it goes badly, it's your fault, not my fault.
Exactly.
What I'm afraid of, though, is if people go to their partner and they say, hey, I see that you're struggling. Is it me? That the reaction can be, well, yeah, why don't you know that? Because the other person is just looking to lash out.
So I think if you've spent some time in a relationship with somebody, you can go to them and say, I feel like you are struggling.
Yeah.
And I would like to do something that would help. And I think
That's,
what I would like is to do rub your feet, rub your back, go for a walk, fix you a piece of pie, cook dinner today. Would that be helpful? Can I try that? Or is there something that you already know that I could do that would make you aware of how much I care about you?
And I think that's excellent. And don't become resentful that you're putting in effort and the other person isn't. If you feel like that is the trend, then you can address that and say, I feel like I'm putting in a lot of effort and I don't think that you're reciprocating that. But the truth is that after the stressful situation, and for right now, that would be the quarantine, is over, the only thing you have is your ability to assess, is this a relationship that I want to be in?
And your ability to communicate that to your partner.
Right.
This is a relationship that I have. It's not working for me.
Right.
But in my experience, women are much more capable of initiating that conversation than men.
Because men have a hard time with feelings.
Exactly, and with communicating about feelings. They don't take that risk. So the challenge then, a challenge, not the challenge, but a challenge becomes for the couple to mutually commit to attempting to do that. And for the men, very often that involves learning a skill they don't have. And so part of the challenge there is you're learning that skill from the person with whom you're having the issue. And if the couple doesn't know how to dance that dance, it just gets worse, not better.
And that is a time when it might be beneficial to seek outside help.
Oh, well, where could they go? Is there a number they could call?
Sure, they could call me. But that's what I mean. It's not your job to teach your partner how to better emotionally regulate and communicate. You can try and do that.
You can teach your partner what language like we talk about Gottman's love languages. When you want to say to me, you love me, one way that you can do that is you can do the dishes. Right. And I'm thinking, that doesn't mean I love you. When I'm saying I love you,
I'm washing your car.
Or I brought you a diamond ring. That says I love you. Well, no, not to me it doesn't. Right. What says I love you to me, or that you love me to me, is when you do the dishes after dinner. and let me just throw my feet up and have a drink. So that awareness has to be communicated and shared. So what works for you? What's your love language? Do you know? And if you don't know what those are, you can look them up. John Gottman and
well, Gary Chapman wrote The Languages of Love.
Gary Chapman. You want to say what they are? You want to run through the litany?
Yeah. So time together, words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, and I'm blanking on the last one.
So am I. I didn't memorize them. I like the touch one.
Yeah.
I like, if I'm standing in the kitchen washing dishes, come up behind me and rub my shoulders. Come up and blow in my ear. Distract me. Put your arms around me. Touch me. Touch is important because it communicates acceptance and safe and affection in ways that a lot of men struggle with. So you find men somewhat more often prefer the language of touch.
And they may not even be aware of it.
Right.
So, you can find different places on the internet where you can do quick quizzes to identify those love languages. But the goal is, and I tell people this all the time, is not to know your love language. It's to know the love language of your partner. And when you try and communicate with them, to communicate with them from their love language, because that's important. Oh, acts of service. So
it's fine. I just looked it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's words of affirmation, acts of service, time together, gifts, and physical touch.
Yeah.
And so communicating through your partner's love language and then them reciprocating, communicating with you through your love language is the quickest way to convey to another person that
I'll
you
touch
love them.
you after you do the dishes.
Well, I mean, hey, you know what? If you want to be touched, then
exactly.
that might be worth it to you.
Pony up.
Right.
Exactly.
So hopefully this has been beneficial for people. As always, we're asking you to go and share the show. Go on the iTunes and the YouTube. Subscribe to the show.
And remember the Meatloaf song, I'd do anything for love, but
That's
I won't
right,
do that.
but I won't do that. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and composed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.